Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have a look at the latest from the live radar as we've got Storm Debbie starting to clear out to the North Sea now. Still got some rain associated with it, but the strongest winds have died down. We did see amber warnings issued earlier across Northern Ireland and Northern England in small areas for winds, but of course they were very short notice, so unfortunately weren't able to put a video out. It is going to remain fairly unsettled over the next few days, and we'll be able to have a look at those latest weather warnings as we've got rain, wind, and even a thunderstorm warning issued, as it is going to remain fairly unsettled, and we'll be able to see that on the latest UKV as well as westerly winds do continue over the next 5 days. But into the medium to longer range, things are really hotting up, or should I say, potentially cooling down, with all the operational runs today producing colder weather as we head towards the end of November. How they produce colder weather, they're not all in agreement, but they all do agree that high pressure is going to be ridging northwards. We're going to see amplification in the jet stream, and colder air is going to flood potentially towards the UK, or at least engulfing northern and western Europe. The Ensembles not as much on board, as there still is quite a bit of scatter, but they are generally on the cooler side, and they are trending cold as well. So really interesting into the long term. Been a little bit more bullish with this, as we are seeing some more consistency. Not only are we seeing consecutive runs showing this cold weather from these models, but now it's consecutive days, 2, 3, 4 days. We've now seen these hints, and they are just increasing. So I'll check that out in the second half of the video. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, which do like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well. The link's in description. Now, if you start on the live radar, you can see the back edge of Storm Debbie now is clearing. The main weather front is now across parts of Denmark and into Central Europe. We're still seeing some squally showers further southwards, especially into parts of central England and Wales as well, and some more persistent rain now slowly clearing across much of Scotland. Starting to turn lighter and more patchy as it does clear, but still fairly miserable here. We did see some stronger gusts. As I said, we did see an amber warning issued earlier, one across Northern Ireland and across Northern England for this morning into the early afternoon. Again, issued at very short notice, so we weren't able to put a video out, but they did cause some severe impacts in places. I have some people saying that Storm Debbie didn't warrant an amber, and perhaps didn't even warrant naming, and I did even suggest that yesterday, that I didn't really see this coming. But I do think it was very much more of a Republic of Ireland event, where we did actually see a red warning issued there. Again, probably overdoing it a little bit in terms of warnings, as the actual issues on the ground were more like sort of 60, 70, 80 mile per hour winds. Still severe, but I do think probably sort of amber warning territory, because if 70, 80 miles per hour is warranted for red warning, then we're likely in some stormier years like we're seeing this year, we'd see red warnings multiple times, whereas they really should be saved for the most dangerous, severe conditions. But regardless of that, things have got better this afternoon. Winds are dying down, and rain is starting to subside. The other thing with Storm Debbie moving in is it has shifted quite a warm air mass further southwards. You can see a lot more yellows here. So again, temperatures in the low teens tonight, but of course will drop away as we eventually see cooler air returning. Now, if we do have a look at the latest wind speeds, you'll be able to see that we haven't got particularly strong wind speeds left, but still gusting across eastern areas, where we're still seeing sustained winds around 20 or 30 miles per hour. Still blustery, and of course wind gusts maybe slightly higher than these sustained winds, but it is slowly dying down. We can have a look at NetWeather and see these are the strongest wind gusts from NetWeather. Again, these are not all the weather stations, but there's a wide array, and you see widely we're looking at 40 to 60 mile per hour. Typical, as I said, yellow warning, maybe local amber warning warranted. But looking at these actual wind gusts again, there is definitely, I think, a debate as to whether the system should have been named, or whether it should have just stayed as a pretty beefy area of low pressure. But of course, as I said, this doesn't include all the weather stations. There have been others reported higher wind gusts than this. Now, if you look at the weather warnings, as Storm Debbie does clear, we've got a yellow warning for rain issued for tonight, expires in only a few hours' time, and it's flat, persistent rain we're seeing at the moment. 30 to 50 millimetres could fall across 12 hours. from earlier today until this evening. So those rainfall totals are totting up. We still have a wind warning issued until 9 p.m. this evening, as well as Storm Debbie does clear. And again, we're looking at wind gusts, perhaps 50 to 60 miles per hour through the evening, through the next few hours. And then finally, we have a weather warning issued for tomorrow for thunderstorms across southern areas through the morning. And it's for a band of squally, thundery rain pushing quickly east across the warning area. Now, as we'll see in the latest UKV in a minute, positioning is very uncertain with this, but we could see 15 to 20 millimetres of rain in a short period of time, maybe gusts of 40 to 50 miles per hour with some hail potentially as well. Now, if we do have a look at the latest UKV, we'll be able to see that squally system move in tomorrow, and it is going to be very difficult to say. It could come to nothing, or it could be fairly intense. Now, you can see the remnants of Storm Debbie slowly clearing, and then as we get into tomorrow morning, you can see that squally rain further southwards, and here it does impact southern and western areas, but actually goes offshore into the channel through the latter part of the morning, not really impacting areas further eastwards. Still some rain around, but just not quite as heavy and thundery. So I do think there is quite a lot of uncertainty with this. It could be severe, as I said, or could come to nothing at all. Through the rest of Tuesday, showers around, but nothing too severe. Northern areas more likely to be peppered by those showers. As we head into Wednesday, more heavier rain around in the north, but elsewhere lighter conditions. And into Wednesday afternoon, we do see a bit of lingering rain across the Midlands, northern England, into parts of Scotland, but most areas either side of that lingering band of rain, pretty dry and fairly sunny as well. Into Thursday, we do start to see more rain approach from the southwest. Some have been saying that there's the risk of another storm system later this week. The latest runs not really supporting that, but still a reasonably strong low pressure system moving in, giving more heavy rain and generally gusty winds. And again, another system moving in there for Saturday as well, keeping a very unsettled theme. Now, if you look at the max temperatures, you can see into tomorrow, temperatures looking around the 10 to 13 degree mark. So generally around average for the time of year, colder further northwards. Into Wednesday, we'll see temperatures once again really struggling across Scotland, just colder areas, holding on further southwards, 8 to 11 degrees. Into Thursday, still really quite cold across Scotland. Again, not too unusual for this time of year. But look at Thursday's temperatures, 5 to 8 degrees quite wide across England and Wales. It is going to be really quite chilly there. And then as we head into Friday, again, pretty chilly through the day, 6 to 10 degrees looking likely. And overnight could drop down to maybe 3 or 4 degrees in some places, but temperatures actually rising as the weather front moves in. And Saturday, actually going to turn a lot milder, as we do see rain and generally milder air move in. But the interesting part that probably most of you have clicked on this video for is the longer range. Now, if we do look at the latest GFS that has only just come out, we'll be able to see potentially some really quite cold weather starting to develop. Now, some of you may be looking and say this is just one anomalous GFS run, but if you are interested, go on to Weather Central and have a look at the past of 3 or 4 runs, and you'll be able to see they're not all the same, they are different, but they all do show the general pattern of high pressure shifting northwards and generally some colder weather developing. Now you can see over the next 5 to 7 days, not much hints of that at all. As we get towards day 7, we've got a bit of a northwesterly wind, but it's a fairly flat jet stream, no signs of anything colder at all. But that high pressure doesn't really budge, and instead it shifts towards Greenland by day 10, and we start to pull a northerly wind in. Now initially you'd think that this is just going to be a bit of a transient northerly, and it is. High pressure does topple and sit over the top of us, but high pressure ridges northwards again in the longer range, and is a lot more successful this time, reaching Svalbard up towards Scandinavia, and actually does start to pull in a pretty cold easterly winds. Now this would be a relatively dry, colder spell, really frosty, feeling very cold with a very strong easterly wind, but regardless is a colder spell and would bring the risk of winteriness in places. Said other runs will be more wintry, other runs will have lower pressure nearby. This run is cold and fairly dry, but all as said showing a very similar pattern. If we do run back to sort of day 10 period, we initially see that northerly wind move in. You see the -5, it just about skirts the east coast here. Again, would bring probably a day or 2 of chilly, frosty weather, but nothing major, and actually a milder air mass comes under the high pressure, likely to be an inversion still, but nowhere near as cold. But then the cold air gathers once again, we see a proper easterly wind develop. The -10 isotherm comes tantalisingly close to southeast England, and it would be very cold indeed. The temperature deviation 10 to maybe even as low as 12 degrees below average, and the potential equivalent temperature is really cold as well. If we zoom into the United Kingdom, look, again, remember, these are not going to be particularly accurate, but they'll be in the ballpark. Dew points well below freezing, and you can see the very bitterly cold air, the freezer sort of conditions are staying just out to our east. But regardless, we are still very cold. And midday on the 29th of November, hardly anywhere is getting above sort of 4 to 6 degrees. Much of Europe, just across the channel, is below freezing in the daytime. Overnight temperatures widely will be below freezing, we have to remember as well. So it would be very cold. It would potentially produce a little bit of winteriness, but probably would remain fairly dry. But yeah, would be a very cold end to November if this GFS came off. Now, if you do compare to the GM, of course, because cross-model consensus is the most important thing. No point one model showing it, but if multiple models start to show it with consistency, then we can say that there is a high probability. Westerly winds continue over the next week or so from the latest GFS from the GM with more generally unsettled conditions. But eventually, at day 10, look what happens. Again, it's not the same way the GFS develops colder weather, but high pressure ridging towards Greenland. You can see this by this sort of greener area with no blues infiltrating. We start to develop a northerly wind on the back edge of this low. Initially, it's not actually particularly cold across the UK. We're actually below average, but it's behind that. We've got a colder pool ready to move in. Again, it'd be nowhere near as cold as the GFS, but it is a colder run. It would be colder than average and definitely would bring the risk of widespread frosts and wintry showers further northwards as this low does pull away. And there is the risk, if this did run on for another few days, that high pressure would become stronger and we'd pull in this very cold air up towards Scandinavia. But that is too far in the future to say with any real certainty. So GM nowhere near as cold as the GFS, but still showing that blocking up towards Greenland and showing that potentially northerly or easterly wind developing. Now, if you look at the latest ECMWF that's just come out, you can see that we are seeing again westerly winds over the next few days, high pressure building over the top of us, and look what happens at day 9, ridges towards Greenland, and at day 10, a bitterly cold northerly wind arrives, and look at that, -5 isotherm moving in. Again, this would be a much colder pattern if this was in January when cold air to our north was much larger, but regardless, very cold air mass moving in directly from the Arctic, and we would again be looking at very cold conditions. Unfortunately, because it's just come out, we can't have a look at those day 10 temperatures, but it is looking very cold regardless at day 10. Look at that, -5 isotherm moving in, and a very cold northerly wind. Would be plenty of wintry showers around, and generally feeling very cold. And this would probably, even though it's not quite as cold as the GFS, would probably be more wintry with this very unstable northerly flow with very tight isobars. The wind speeds, unfortunately, won't load either, or haven't come out either, but would be conductive of potentially gale force northerly winds there. And again, if this did come on for longer, we'd potentially develop some of this cold, even colder air out towards Scandinavia would move our way instead of this sort of transitioning cold air on the back edge of the lower pressure. So all three main runs all going cold. GFS probably going the coldest, ECMWF going the most wintry, the GM going cold but very unsettled, potentially pulling more colder air in on the back edge. So all three runs showing different ways of getting there, but all getting towards colder conditions to end November. Now the ensembles are very interesting as well. As I said, over the last couple of days, they have been trending colder. They were a few days ago above average. The last day or two, they were towards average, sort of hovering slightly below. And there's more distinct below average now into the final sort of 5 days of November. The next week to 10 days, though, you can see pretty consistently up and down. Traditional westerly flow with quite a lot of unsettled conditions, with lots of precipitation around. Longer term, though, you can see turning much colder. We're seeing a lot more runs getting towards the -5 area, and even some now, including the operational run, getting below that, even a couple runs towards the -10 region, which would bring the risk of snow to anywhere, really. So again, not saying it's guaranteed, but there is the risk there as we head into the longer range. And the most important thing to look at, really, for air masses in this sort of situation, because of course you can see a bit of an inversion under even some of these milder air masses, is the dew point. And the dew point is dropping considerably as well. We are seeing some colder dew points in the next week or so, but it's the consistently cold dew points and dew points from some of these ensemble members going down to the -5 line or lower, which shows some really quite cold, frigid air. And the 2 meter temperatures are dropping as well. Again, it's inevitable as we head towards December and winter in general. It's inevitable those upper air temperatures do drop, but here you can see they're dropping from sort of 10 to 15 degrees in the day for London down towards 6, 7 or 8 at best. And finally, if we finish by looking at the ECMWF ensembles, the midday run, of course, hasn't come out. But then in midnight run, you see again a trend towards cooler conditions. The ECMWF has definitely been a little bit less bullish with any changes in the longer term, but there is definitely more runs down towards the -5 level and lower than that, meaning that the risk of colder wind in the longer term isn't guaranteed, but is definitely increasing in the ensembles of the ECMWF as well. And finally, the 2 meter temperatures are descending as well. Again, it's typical, heading towards winter, but more here now getting towards that sort of 6, 7, 8 degrees, which is below average for November, and even some runs down towards the low single digits as well. So we've got some generally unsettled and average sort of conditions over the next 5 to 7 days, but beyond that, things could be changing for colder weather, potentially. I must put that potentially in there because things can change very quickly. And of course, this cold weather has come on quite quickly within the model. It's been hinted at for a while of some blocking, but actual cold runs appearing only really the last sort of 3 or 4 days, and consistently sort of the last 48 hours or so. It'll be very interesting to see how it does develop over the next couple of days, and whether one sort of concrete blocking scenario comes in, a Scandinavian high, mid-Atlantic ridge, even a Greenland high, whatever sort of that pattern, whatever pattern sort of starts to stand out within the models, and we see some consistency with, then we could start to say exactly how it could play out. But for now, definitely trends towards colder weather in the longer term, but we cannot say exactly how it will evolve until we see some more agreement in the overall sort of pressure pattern from the operational runs. So anyway, thanks for watching, hope you have enjoyed, make sure you stay safe, and I'll see you again for another video soon.